The scent of dust and hopelessness hung thick in the air the day Theodore Walsh understood she would never be chosen. That at 23 years old, she had become invisible to every family who walked through the orphanage doors in Fort Stockton, Texas. She stood by the window in the drafty third-floor room, watching the last wagon of the day disappear down the rutted road, carrying away Emily Morrison, the youngest girl who had arrived only 3 months ago. The year was 1878, and the orphanage had been Theodore's home since she was 7, when cholera had taken both her parents within a week of each other. 16 years of waiting, of hoping, of watching younger children find families while she grew older and less desirable with each passing season. Mrs. Hadley, the orphanage matron, climbed the stairs with heavy footsteps that echoed Theodore's own heavy heart. The woman appeared in the doorway, her gray hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her weathered face. She carried a single carpet bag, worn and patched in several places. "Theodore," Mrs. Hadley said, her voice softer than usual. "We need to talk." Theodore turned from the window, already knowing what was coming. She had seen the ledgers last week when delivering mending to the office. The numbers told a story of declining donations and rising costs. The orphanage was closing. "The building has been sold," Mrs. Hadley continued, sitting heavily on one of the narrow beds. "The new owners take possession in 2 weeks. The board has found placements for all the children with other charitable institutions in Dallas and San Antonio." She paused, meeting Theodore's eyes. "But you are of age. You are no longer our responsibility." Theodore nodded, her throat tight. She had expected this, but expectation did not soften the blow. "I understand. I have saved what I could for you." Mrs. Hadley handed her the carpet bag. "There are 3 dresses, some undergarments, a coat for winter, and $12. It is not much, but it is all I can manage." "Thank you," Theodore whispered, taking the bag with trembling hands. $12 might last a month if she was careful, perhaps 2 if she was lucky. Then what? The options for a woman alone in West Texas were limited and often grim. She could seek work as a laundress or perhaps a seamstress, though competition for such positions was fierce. The alternative, the path too many desperate women took, made her stomach turn. Mrs. Hadley stood, smoothing her dark skirts. "There is a boarding house on 3rd Street. Mrs. Patterson runs it. Tell her I sent you. She might have work in exchange for room and board." The matron paused at the door, her expression softening further. "You have always been a good girl, Theodore. I wish circumstances were different." After Mrs. Hadley left, Theodore sat on the bed she had slept in for 16 years and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes of tears. Then she dried her eyes, straightened her shoulders, and began to plan. She had 2 weeks to find employment and lodging. 2 weeks before she would be truly alone in the world. The next morning, Theodore dressed in her best dress, a faded blue calico that she had carefully maintained, and walked into town. Fort Stockton was not large, but it served as an important stop along the Western Trail, which meant a steady flow of travelers, ranchers, and cowboys. The main street bustled with activity despite the early hour. Wagons rumbled past, kicking up clouds of dust that settled on everything. Men on horseback moved with purpose, their spurs jingling. Women hurried along the wooden sidewalks with shopping baskets and purposeful expressions. Theodore visited the boarding house first. Mrs. Patterson, a stout woman with sharp eyes and sharper features, looked her up and down with clear skepticism. "Mrs. Hadley sent you?" Mrs. Patterson asked, crossing her arms over her ample bosom. "Yes, madam. I am seeking work in exchange for lodging." "Can you cook?" "Yes, madam. I helped in the orphanage kitchen for years." "Can you clean?" "Yes, madam." Mrs. Patterson's eyes narrowed. "The orphanage is closing. Why should I take on help when you will have no references afterward? Mrs. Hadley will be gone herself." Theodore's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. "I am a hard worker, madam. I can prove my worth." "I already have help," Mrs. Patterson said flatly. "Try the hotel. They are always needing chambermaids." The dismissal was clear, and Theodore found herself back on the dusty street. The hotel manager barely looked at her before shaking his head. "Position was filled yesterday." The restaurant owner said the same. The general store needed no help. The seamstress had more work than customers. By midday, Theodore's feet ached and her hope had worn as thin as her boot soles. She stood outside the saloon, considering whether to inquire within, knowing that such establishments sometimes hired women for serving drinks. But she also knew what other expectations often came with such employment, and she could not bring herself to cross that threshold. Instead, she walked to the small church at the end of town. Reverend Thompson was weeding the small garden beside the building, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his hat protecting his balding head from the relentless Texas sun. "Good afternoon, Reverend," Theodore called. The older man looked up, squinting against the brightness, then smiled when he recognized her. "Miss Walsh, what brings you into town?" She explained the situation quickly and without self-pity, though her voice wavered when she mentioned the orphanage closing. Reverend Thompson listened carefully, his expression growing troubled. "I wish I had something to offer," he said when she finished. "But the church barely has funds for my own modest salary. However, I will keep my ears open. Sometimes opportunities arise unexpectedly." Theodore thanked him and turned to leave, blinking back fresh tears. She would not cry in public. She would not. "Miss Walsh," the Reverend called after her, "have faith. The Lord provides in mysterious ways." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and walked back toward the orphanage. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and dust coated her dress and clung to her skin. She had gone through her entire mental list of possibilities and found every door closed. The future stretched before her, dark and uncertain. She was so lost in her troubled thoughts that she did not notice the commotion ahead until she was nearly upon it. A crowd had gathered near the livery stable, and raised voices carried down the street. Theodore slowed, intending to go around, but curiosity drew her closer. "You promised payment today," a man shouted. Theodore recognized him as Mr. Jennings, who owned the livery. "And I told you the cattle sale does not happen until Friday," another voice answered, calmer but edged with frustration. "You will have your money then." "That is what you said last week." "I am tired of your excuses, Yates." Theodore moved to where she could see through a gap in the crowd. The second man stood with his back to the livery wall, his hat pushed back to reveal dark hair and a sun-weathered face. He was tall and lean, with the hard, muscled build of someone who made his living through physical labor. His clothes were worn but clean, and despite the aggressive stance of Mr. Jennings, he appeared more weary than worried. "It is not an excuse," the man, Yates, said evenly. "It is the truth." The buyer delayed by 2 days. "I cannot control that. I want what I am owed, or I am taking your horses as payment. Those horses are worth 3 times what I owe you for feed and board. You know that is not fair." Mr. Jennings stepped closer, jabbing a finger at Yates's chest. "Then sell one and pay me now." Theodore watched as Yates's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists at his sides. But he did not move, did not strike, though the provocation was clear. Instead, he took a slow breath. "I will have your money Friday," he said quietly. "You have my word." "Your word is not worth much these days." The crowd murmured, some in agreement, others in sympathy. Theodore felt an unexpected surge of indignation on behalf of this stranger. Mr. Jennings was known for being difficult, always looking for an angle to make extra profit. If he took the horses, he would sell them for far more than he was owed and claim it as fair business. Before she could think better of it, Theodore stepped forward. "Excuse me." The crowd turned to look at her, and she felt her face heat under the scrutiny. But she had started now and could not back down. "Mr. Jennings," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "is this man's debt truly so urgent that it cannot wait 2 more days?" Mr. Jennings scowled at her. "This is not your concern, Miss Walsh." "Perhaps not," she agreed. "But it seems to me that a businessman of your reputation would want to be known for fairness, not for taking advantage when a man is temporarily unable to pay through no fault of his own." "Temporarily unable," Mr. Jennings repeated mockingly. "He has been temporarily unable for 2 weeks." Theodore looked at the man called Yates, who was staring at her with an expression of surprise and something that might have been gratitude. Up close, she could see that his eyes were a striking shade of gray-blue, like storm clouds over the desert. He looked to be perhaps in his late 20s, with the kind of face that had seen hardship but had not yet hardened completely. "Is the debt large?" she asked. $8, Yates said quietly, $8. 2/3 of her entire worldly wealth. Theodore should have walked away. She should have minded her own business. She had her own desperate situation to worry about. But something in this stranger's eyes, something in the way he had refused to fight despite provocation, made her reach into her pocket. "I will pay it," she said. The crowd erupted in whispers. Yates straightened, shaking his head. "No, I cannot accept that." "Why not?" Theodore pulled out her small purse, trying not to think about what this meant for her own future. "You will repay me on Friday when you receive your payment, yes?" "Yes, but I do not even know you." "That does not matter. It is a loan, not a gift." She counted out 8 precious dollars and held them out to Mr. Jennings, who took them with greedy fingers and a suspicious expression. "This does not explain why you are involving yourself," Mr. Jennings said. Theodore met his gaze steadily. "Because it is the right thing to do." She turned and walked away before anyone could say more, before she could change her mind, before the full weight of what she had done could settle on her shoulders. She made it around the corner and halfway down the next street before a hand touched her elbow. "Wait, please." She turned to find Yates had followed her. Up close and away from the hostile crowd, he seemed even taller. He removed his hat, holding it in both hands, his expression earnest. "That was foolish," he said bluntly. "Perhaps," Theodore agreed. "I could be a swindler, I could take your money and disappear." "Will you?" He looked startled by the direct question. "No, but you had no way of knowing that." "I suppose I am a good judge of character," Theodore said, though truthfully she had acted on impulse, on instinct, on something she could not name. Yates studied her face for a long moment, his gray-blue eyes searching. "What is your name?" "Theodore Walsh." "Isaac Yates." He extended his hand and she shook it, noting the calluses that spoke of hard work and the firm but careful grip. "I promise you will have your money Friday, Miss Walsh, with interest for your trouble." "The $8 will suffice," Theodore said. "I do not want profit from helping someone in need." Isaac's expression softened. "You are not from around here, are you? That kind of thinking does not last long in Fort Stockton." "I have lived here for 16 years, Theodore said quietly, "at the orphanage." Understanding flickered in Isaac's eyes. "The one that is closing." "Yes." He glanced down the street, then back at her. "May I walk you home? It is the least I can do." Theodore hesitated, aware of propriety, aware that being seen alone with a man could damage her reputation. Then she almost laughed at herself. What reputation did an orphan with no prospects have to protect? "All right," she said. They walked in silence for a few minutes, their footsteps raising small puffs of dust. The afternoon had faded toward evening and the brutal heat had eased to merely uncomfortable. A slight breeze carried the scent of creosote and sage from the surrounding desert. "Why did you do it?" Isaac asked finally. "Help me." Theodore considered the question. "I do not like bullies." Mr. Jennings was being unfair. Still, $8 is a considerable sum. "Yes," she agreed softly, "it is." Isaac looked at her sharply. "Do you have employment? Somewhere to go when the orphanage closes?" "Not yet, but I have 2 weeks to find something." He was quiet for another few paces. "I have a ranch," he said slowly. "About an hour's ride northwest of here. Small operation. I run cattle mostly, some horses. I do the work myself because I cannot afford to hire hands year-round." Theodore was not sure why he was telling her this. She waited, sensing there was more. "I could use help," Isaac continued. "Cooking, cleaning, mending, general housekeeping. I have been batching it for 3 years since my mother passed, and the place shows it. I could offer room and board and a small wage, $2 a week." Theodore stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "You are offering me employment?" "Yes. You do not know me. You just gave me $8 based on nothing but your instinct that I was honest. I figure I can take the same gamble." Theodore's heart began to beat faster. Room and board and $2 a week. It was not much, but it was infinitely better than nothing. It was salvation, but it was also potentially dangerous. Going to live alone on a ranch with a man she had just met. The impropriety was staggering. If anyone found out, her reputation would be destroyed, not that she had much to lose in that regard. "I would work for my keep," she said carefully, "but I would need certain assurances. Such as, that you are an honorable man, that I would be safe." Isaac met her eyes directly. "I give you my word. I am not looking for a wife or a companion. I need someone to help run the household. That is all. Your person and your privacy would be respected absolutely." Theodore searched his face, looking for any sign of deception or hidden intent. She saw only sincerity and a bone-deep weariness that she recognized because she felt it too. "I am a hard worker," she said. "I do not complain and I do not shirk duties." "I am not an easy man to live around," Isaac warned. "I am gone long days working the herd. I am not much for conversation. The ranch is isolated. You would be alone much of the time. I am used to solitude." Isaac studied her for another long moment, then nodded decisively. "Come home with me." The words, simple and direct, seemed to echo in the evening air. Theodore felt the weight of the decision pressing on her. Every practical bone in her body screamed that this was madness. But what choice did she have? 2 weeks until she was homeless and penniless, and every door in town had been closed to her. "When would I start?" she asked. "I was planning to head back tomorrow morning." "But if you need more time to settle affairs." "I can be ready tomorrow," Theodore said quickly. Better to leave sooner than spend 2 weeks dreading what was to come. Isaac nodded. "I will come by the orphanage at first light. Bring whatever you can carry." The ranch is not much, but it has the basics. They had reached the orphanage gates. Theodore paused, her hand on the iron bars, and looked back at Isaac. "Thank you," she said softly, "for this opportunity." "Thank me after you have seen what you are getting yourself into," Isaac replied, but there was a hint of warmth in his voice. "Get some rest, Miss Walsh. Tomorrow will be a long day." Theodore watched him walk back toward town, his long stride eating up the dusty road. What had she done? She had given away most of her money and agreed to live alone with a stranger on an isolated ranch. Mrs. Hadley would be horrified. Reverend Thompson would counsel prayer and caution. But as Theodore climbed the steps to the orphanage, she felt something she had not experienced in a very long time: hope. Mrs. Hadley was indeed horrified. When Theodore explained the situation over dinner, the matron's face went through several shades of red. Absolutely not, Mrs. Hadley said firmly. I cannot allow you to go off with a man you do not know. It is improper and dangerous. I am of age, Theodore reminded her gently. You said yourself I am no longer your responsibility. That does not mean I will stand by and watch you ruin yourself. Theodore, think about what you are saying. Alone with a man, unchaperoned, miles from town. What will people think? They will think I am trying to survive, Theodore said quietly. Mrs. Hadley, what choice do I have? I spent all day looking for work. No one will hire me. If I do not take this opportunity, where will I go in 2 weeks? Mrs. Hadley's expression crumpled slightly. I wish there was another way. So do I, but there is not. Theodore reached across the table to touch the older woman's hand. I will be careful. I will be smart. And if things are not as Mr. Yates promised, I will leave immediately. How? You will be an hour from town with no horse. I can walk if I must. Mrs. Hadley sighed heavily. You have always been stubborn, even as a child. But her voice was fond, and when she looked at Theodore, her eyes were wet. I have failed you. No, Theodore said firmly. You gave me a home when I had none. You taught me to read and write and do sums. You taught me skills that will serve me wherever I go. You have not failed me. That night, Theodore lay awake in her narrow bed, listening to the familiar creaks and groans of the old building. Tomorrow she would leave the only home she remembered. Tomorrow she would step into an unknown future with only faith and desperation to guide her. She thought of Isaac Yates, his storm-colored eyes and work-roughened hands, his blunt honesty and the weariness in his voice when he spoke of batching it alone for 3 years. She thought of his promise that she would be safe, and she chose to believe him because the alternative was unbearable. Just before dawn, Theodore rose and dressed in her traveling clothes. She packed the carpet bag Mrs. Hadley had given her, adding the few personal items she owned. A book of poetry that had been her mother's, a pressed flower from the garden, a small wooden horse that one of the younger children had carved for her years ago. Mrs. Hadley met her at the door as the first light touched the eastern horizon. He is here, she said quietly. Theodore stepped outside to find Isaac waiting beside a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses. He had cleaned up since yesterday, his face freshly shaved, his shirt clean though faded from many washings. When he saw her, he climbed down and took her bag, storing it carefully in the wagon bed. Morning, Miss Walsh, he said, his voice still rough with early morning gravel. Mr. Yates. Mrs. Hadley cleared her throat. Mr. Yates, I want your word as a gentleman that Miss Walsh will be treated with respect and propriety. Isaac looked the matron directly in the eyes. You have it, madam. I am a man of my word. Mrs. Hadley studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. She turned to Theodore, pulling her into a tight embrace. Be safe, she whispered, and write if you can. I will, Theodore promised, her voice thick with emotion. Isaac helped her up to the wagon seat, his hand steady and impersonal. Then he swung up beside her, gathered the reins, and clicked to the horses. The wagon lurched forward, and Theodore watched as the orphanage grew smaller behind them. They rode in silence as the sun climbed higher, painting the desert landscape in shades of gold and red. The town fell away, replaced by endless stretches of scrubland dotted with mesquite and prickly pear. The air smelled of dust and heat and something wild and untamed. It is beautiful, Theodore said after a while, surprising herself. Isaac glanced at her. Most people find it harsh. It is harsh, she agreed, but beautiful too, honest somehow. Something in Isaac's expression shifted, softened slightly. Yes, he said quietly, that is exactly right. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat the simple meal Isaac had brought, jerky and hardtack and water from a canteen. Theodore sat on a large rock, grateful to stretch her legs, and watched as Isaac tended to the animals with practiced efficiency. "Tell me about the ranch," she said. Isaac looked up from checking a horse's hoof. "What do you want to know? How large is it? How many cattle?" 200 acres, give or take. About 100 head of cattle currently, though I am hoping to build that up. A few chickens, a milk cow, the horses you see here plus 3 more. The house is small, 2 bedrooms, a main room that serves as kitchen and living area. There is a separate bunkhouse that I use for storage since I have no hands to house. Where will I sleep? The second bedroom. It was my mother's. I cleaned it out last week, put fresh linens on the bed. It is not fancy, but it is private and secure. You will have a lock on your door. The fact that he had thought to mention the lock eased something tight in Theodore's chest. And my duties: cooking, cleaning, laundry, mending, tending the vegetable garden and the chickens, churning butter. Basically keeping the household running while I manage the stock and the land. He paused. I warn you, it is a lot of work. I am gone from before dawn until after dark most days. You would be on your own quite a bit. I am not afraid of work or solitude, Theodore said. Isaac nodded, accepting this. They finished their meal in companionable silence, then continued on. The ranch came into view as the afternoon sun began its descent. Theodore saw the house first, a low structure built of rough-hewn logs and adobe, with a covered porch that faced east. Nearby stood a barn, a chicken coop, a small stable, and the bunkhouse Isaac had mentioned. A windmill creaked in the breeze, pumping water into a trough. Everything was worn but functional, maintained with obvious care despite limited resources. Isaac pulled the wagon up to the house and helped Theodore down. "Welcome to the Y-Bar Ranch," he said simply. Theodore stood for a moment, taking it all in. The house looked weathered but solid. The porch had a rocking chair, and she could imagine sitting there in the cool of evening, watching the sunset paint the sky. Beyond the buildings, the land stretched away in rolling hills dotted with cattle. It was isolated, certainly, but it was also peaceful in a way she had never experienced. "Let me show you around," Isaac said, picking up her bag. The interior of the house was dim after the bright sunshine, and Theodore blinked as her eyes adjusted. The main room was indeed both kitchen and living area, with a wood stove, a sturdy table with 4 chairs, a few cabinets, and a rocking chair near the fireplace. Everything was clean but sparse, functional rather than comfortable. Isaac led her to the second bedroom. It was small, with barely enough room for a narrow bed, a dresser, and a washstand. But the bed was made with obvious care, the quilt faded but clean. A small window looked out toward the eastern hills. And yes, there was a lock on the door. "It is not much," Isaac said, sounding almost apologetic. "It is perfect," Theodore said honestly. She had shared a room with 12 other girls for 16 years. This small, private space felt like luxury. Isaac set her bag on the bed. "I will leave you to settle in. There is water in the pitcher for washing. When you are ready, I will show you the rest of the property." After he left, closing the door quietly behind him, Theodore sat on the bed and let out a long, shaky breath. She was here. She had actually done it. For better or worse, this was her new life. She unpacked her few belongings, placing her mother's book of poetry on the small shelf above the bed, hanging her dresses on the pegs along the wall. Then she washed her face and hands, tidied her hair, and went to find Isaac. He was in the barn, forking hay into the horse stalls. He looked up when she entered, and she saw a flash of something in his eyes, relief perhaps, as if he had worried she might bolt. "Ready for the tour?" he asked. Theodore spent the next hour learning the layout of the ranch. Isaac showed her the chicken coop and introduced her to the 6 hens and 1 rooster who would provide eggs. He showed her the milk cow, Bessie, who eyed Theodore with patient indifference. He pointed out the vegetable garden, which was struggling in the heat but showed signs of careful tending. "I do not have much skill with growing things," Isaac admitted. "I keep it alive, but it does not thrive." Theodore knelt beside the tomato plants, examining the dry soil. "They need more water and some mulch to help retain moisture. I can manage that. You know gardening." The orphanage had a large garden. I spent many hours there. She stood, brushing dirt from her skirts. "I can make this productive." Isaac nodded, looking pleased. They continued the tour, ending at the small stable where 3 more horses stood in stalls, their ears pricking forward at the sound of voices. "This is Shadow," Isaac said, patting a black gelding's neck. "And this is Star, and the mare there is Daisy. Shadow is the best cow horse I have. Star is good for general riding. Daisy is getting older, but she is gentle." "Can I ride?" Theodore asked. Isaac looked surprised. "You know how I learned when I was young before I came to the orphanage. My father had horses." The memory rose sharp and unexpected. She pushed it down. "You can ride any of them if you need to," Isaac said. "Though I hope you will not need to often. The town is a fair distance." They walked back to the house as the sun touched the horizon. The sky blazed with color, orange and pink and deep purple, the clouds edged in gold. Theodore stopped to watch, transfixed by the beauty. "It is different every night," Isaac said quietly beside her. "I never tire of it. I can see why." In the house, Theodore surveyed the kitchen while Isaac lit the lamps. The pantry held basics: flour, cornmeal, salt, dried beans, a few tins of vegetables and fruit. There was salt pork and bacon hanging from hooks, dried beef, eggs from the chickens. "I usually make simple things," Isaac said. "Beans, bacon, cornbread. I am not much of a cook." "I can do better than that," Theodore said with certainty. She rolled up her sleeves. "Let me make dinner tonight. You must be hungry." Isaac looked like he wanted to protest, but instead he nodded. "I will tend to the evening chores then." Alone in the kitchen, Theodore felt a sense of calm settle over her. This she knew. This she could do. She found potatoes in a bin, onions hanging in a net. She cut the salt pork into pieces and set them to frying while she peeled and diced the potatoes. She found dried herbs, likely wild gathered, and used them to season the dish. She mixed cornbread batter and set it to bake in the oven. By the time Isaac returned, washing up at the pump outside before entering, the house smelled of cooking food. Theodore saw his expression shift, something unguarded crossing his features before he schooled them back to neutrality. They sat at the table and Theodore served the meal. For a few minutes they ate in silence. Then Isaac looked up. "This is good," he said simply. "Really good. Better than anything I have eaten in 3 years." Theodore felt a small glow of pride. "Thank you." "No, thank you. I did not realize how much I missed a proper meal." After dinner, Isaac insisted on helping clean up despite Theodore's protests. They worked side by side at the basin, his hands sure and capable as he dried while she washed. It felt oddly domestic, comfortable in a way that surprised her. When the kitchen was clean, Isaac excused himself. "I rise before dawn," he said. "You do not need to get up that early. I will make my own breakfast and be gone. You can eat when you wake and begin the day's work whenever you are ready." "I am used to early hours," Theodore said. "I can make you breakfast." Isaac hesitated. "That would be kind, but do not feel obligated. I want to earn my keep." He nodded slowly. "Then I will see you in the morning, Miss Walsh. Sleep well. You too, Mr. Yates." In her small room, Theodore changed into her nightgown and lay in the narrow bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Somewhere outside, a coyote called, wild and lonesome. The windmill creaked rhythmically. The house itself made small sounds as the wood cooled from the day's heat. She thought about the strange turn her life had taken. Yesterday morning she had been desperate and alone. Now she had a place to sleep, work to do, and $8 less in her pocket. She thought about Isaac, his quiet manner and careful courtesy. The way he had looked at her when he returned to the house smelling of cooking food, like she had given him something precious. She fell asleep to the sound of the windmill and slept deeply for the first time in weeks. True to her word, Theodore rose before dawn. She dressed quickly in the dark, then made her way to the kitchen by the light of a single lamp. She built up the fire in the stove and set coffee to brewing. She found more eggs, fresh from yesterday, and fried them along with bacon. She made biscuits from scratch, working the dough quickly and competently, and set them to bake. Isaac emerged from his room dressed in work clothes, his hair still damp from washing, surprise clear on his face when he saw the spread on the table. "Good morning," Theodore said, pouring coffee into a tin cup. "Morning." Isaac sat, looking slightly bewildered. "You did not have to do all this." "I wanted to." She served him a plate and poured her own coffee, then sat across from him. They ate together as the sky outside lightened from black to gray to soft pink. Isaac told her about his plans for the day, riding out to check the herd in the northern pasture, repairing a section of fence that had gone down in the last windstorm. Theodore listened, filing away information, learning the rhythms of this new life. "I will likely be back around sunset," Isaac said, standing and carrying his plate to the basin. "But if I am delayed, do not worry. Sometimes cattle wander and it takes longer to round them up. I will be fine." Isaac paused at the door, his hat in his hands. "Miss Walsh, I want you to know. You do not have to prove yourself. You are here. You have a place. You do not have to work yourself to exhaustion to earn it." Something in Theodore's chest tightened. "I know, but I want to contribute." "You already are." He settled his hat on his head. "Thank you for breakfast." It was good to start the day with a hot meal and good coffee. After he left, Theodore cleaned the kitchen, then surveyed the house with a critical eye. Dust covered every surface. The floors needed sweeping and scrubbing. The windows were so dirty that they barely let in light. The curtains, what few there were limp with age and grime. She set to work. By midday, she had swept and scrubbed the floors, washed the windows until they gleamed, and taken down the curtains to wash. She found a neglected flower bed near the front porch and spent an hour pulling weeds and turning the soil. She checked on the chickens, collecting eggs and refreshing their water. She milked Bessie, whose patient demeanor made the task easy despite Theodore's rusty skills. In the afternoon, she tackled the vegetable garden. She hauled water from the pump and soaked the plants thoroughly, then gathered dried grass from around the barn to spread as mulch. The work was hot and tiring, but satisfying. Already the plants seemed to perk up slightly. She made bread, setting the dough to rise while she washed and hung the curtains. She prepared a stew with dried beef and vegetables, letting it simmer slowly so the flavors would meld. She churned butter, the repetitive motion almost meditative. By the time the sun began to descend, Theodore was exhausted but content. The house looked better, the garden was watered, dinner was ready. She washed up and changed into a clean dress, then sat on the porch to watch for Isaac's return. He rode in as the sky turned gold, sitting easy in the saddle despite the long day. When he saw Theodore on the porch, he raised a hand in greeting. She stood and went to meet him at the barn. "How was your day?" she asked. "Long, hot. Found the strays and got the fence mended." He swung down from the saddle, moving slightly stiffly. "How about yours? Productive." They walked to the house together, and Isaac stopped dead when he stepped inside. The clean windows let in the golden evening light. The floors shone. Everything was ordered and clean and for the first time in years cared for. "You did all this?" Isaac asked, his voice rough. "I told you I was a hard worker." He turned slowly, taking it all in. When he looked at Theodore, his expression was unguarded, showing something that might have been wonder or gratitude or both. "It looks like a home again," he said quietly. Theodore felt her throat tighten. "That was my intention." They fell into a routine over the following days. Theodore rose early and made breakfast. Isaac ate quickly and rode out to work the ranch. Theodore spent her days cleaning, cooking, tending the garden and the animals, doing the 1,000 tasks that kept a household running. Isaac returned at sunset, tired and dusty, to a hot meal and a clean house. They did not talk much at first. Isaac was not naturally talkative, and Theodore was still finding her footing in this new life. But gradually, over dinner or in the quiet evenings when they both sat on the porch to catch the breeze, conversation began to flow more easily. Theodore learned that Isaac was 27, that he had grown up on this ranch, that his father had died when he was 15, leaving him to run the place with his mother's help. He spoke of his mother with deep affection, describing her strength and determination. When she died 3 years ago, Isaac had been left alone, struggling to keep the ranch going while grieving. "She would have liked you," Isaac said one evening. "She always said this place needed a woman's touch, that I was letting it go to ruin." "You were doing your best," Theodore said gently. "One person cannot do everything." "That is what she said too." Isaac smiled slightly. "She also said I needed to find a wife, but I never had much luck in that department." Theodore felt her face warm and was grateful for the dimming light. "Why not?" Isaac shrugged. "Most women take one look at this place and see hardship. They want town life, pretty things, security. I cannot offer much beyond hard work and isolation." "Some women might see opportunity," Theodore said. "A chance to build something, like you." She met his eyes. "Yes, like me." Something passed between them in that moment, a shift in the air like the seconds before lightning strikes. Isaac looked away first, clearing his throat. "I need to ride into town on Friday," he said. "The cattle sale. Would you like to come? You could visit the orphanage, see Mrs. Hadley." Theodore had been at the ranch for nearly 2 weeks. The orphanage would be closed now, the children dispersed. Mrs. Hadley moved on to wherever she was going next. But she nodded anyway. "Yes, I would like that." Friday dawned clear and already warm. They left early, Theodore wearing her best dress, her hair carefully pinned. The wagon ride to town felt different than the ride out had been. Then she had been terrified and desperate, stepping into the unknown. Now she felt grounded, purposeful. She had a place. She had work she was good at. She had, against all odds, found stability. The cattle sale was held in a large pen on the edge of town. Isaac conducted his business with quiet competence, negotiating a fair price for the 20 head he was selling. Theodore watched, fascinated by this glimpse into the working life of the ranch. When the money changed hands, Isaac counted out $8 and held them out to her. "Your loan with my thanks," he said. Theodore took the money, folding it carefully into her purse. "Thank you for being an honest man. Thank you for believing I was." They walked together to where the orphanage stood empty. The gates were closed, the windows dark. A sign announced that the property was under new ownership. Theodore stood looking at the building that had been her home for so long, feeling a complex mix of emotions, sadness and relief and gratitude all tangled together. "Are you all right?" Isaac asked quietly. "Yes," Theodore said. "I am saying goodbye, I think, to that part of my life." "Is that hard?" "Yes and no. It was not always happy, but it was safe, known." She turned to look at him. "But I think this new life might be better." Isaac held her gaze for a long moment. "I hope so," he said. "You deserve better." They had dinner at the restaurant, a small luxury that made Theodore feel special. Over roast chicken and potatoes, Isaac told her about his plans for the ranch, his hope to increase the herd, maybe buy more land if he could save enough. "I want to build something lasting," he said. "Something I can be proud of." "You should be proud already," Theodore said. "You have kept this place going through hard times. That takes strength and determination." Isaac looked surprised, as if the thought had not occurred to him. "I just did what had to be done." "That is exactly what I mean." On the ride home, the setting sun painted the landscape in shades of amber and rose. Theodore sat beside Isaac on the wagon seat, feeling content in a way she never had before. When they reached the ranch, Isaac helped her down, his hands steady on her waist. "Thank you for today," Theodore said. "It was good to go into town, but it was even better to come home." Isaac's hands lingered for just a moment before he stepped back. "This is your home, Theodore, for as long as you want it to be." The use of her first name sent a small thrill through her. She had not given him permission to use it, but somehow it felt right, natural. "Thank you, Isaac," she said softly. His eyes widened slightly at her use of his name, then he smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious face. "You are welcome." The days turned into weeks. The garden flourished under Theodore's care, providing fresh vegetables. The chickens laid faithfully. Theodore learned to make cheese from Bessie's milk. She mended every piece of clothing Isaac owned, often sitting on the porch in the evening with her sewing basket while he worked on bridles or saddles that needed repair. They talked more as they grew comfortable with each other. Isaac told her about his childhood, riding these lands with his father, learning the ways of cattle and horses. Theodore shared carefully edited stories of orphanage life, the friendships she had made, the small joys and large hardships. One evening, Isaac came home with a small package wrapped in brown paper. He handed it to Theodore with an almost shy expression. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a bolt of blue fabric, soft and lovely, the color of cornflowers. Theodore stared at it, speechless. "I noticed your dresses are all worn," Isaac said. "I thought you might like something new. If the color is not to your liking, I can exchange it." "It is beautiful," Theodore whispered, running her fingers over the fabric. "But you did not have to do this." "I wanted to. You work hard." "You deserve something nice." Theodore looked up at him, her eyes stinging with tears. "Thank you. This is the kindest thing anyone has done for me in a very long time." Isaac shifted, clearly uncomfortable with the emotion. "It is just fabric." "No," Theodore said. "It is not just fabric. It is thoughtfulness. It is seeing me as a person, not just a worker." That night, Theodore lay in bed holding the fabric to her chest, thinking about the man in the next room. Isaac Yates, who paid his debts and worked from dawn to dark, who had given her a chance when no one else would, who thought to buy her pretty fabric because her dresses were worn. She was developing feelings for him. She could admit that to herself, here in the darkness. Feelings that went beyond gratitude, beyond respect. When he smiled at her, her heart beat faster. When he rode in at the end of the day, she found herself watching for him, anticipating his arrival. When they sat together on the porch in the evenings, she was acutely aware of his presence, the warmth of him, the sound of his breathing. It was foolish. He had hired her as a housekeeper, nothing more. He had promised her safety and respect and had kept that promise absolutely. There had been no improper advances, no suggestions of anything beyond the professional relationship they had established. But sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. Sometimes his hand would brush hers by accident, and he would pull away as if burned. Sometimes she would turn and find him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Perhaps she was not alone in this growing attraction. Summer deepened into the scorching heat of late July. Theodore woke one morning to find the water in her pitcher warm, despite sitting all night. The air itself felt thick and heavy, pressing down like a blanket. She made breakfast as usual, but Isaac lingered over his coffee, his expression troubled. "Storm coming," he said, looking out the window. "Big one, I think." Theodore followed his gaze. The sky to the west was darkening, clouds building in towering columns. Even as she watched, lightning flickered in the distance. "I need to bring the herd in closer," Isaac said, standing abruptly. "Get them to the near pasture where I can keep an eye on them. A storm like this can scatter cattle for miles, and I cannot afford to lose any." "What can I do?" Theodore asked. "Make sure everything is secured. Bring in anything that might blow away. Fill every bucket and barrel we have with water from the pump in case the windmill goes down. Store extra food where you can reach it easily. And stay in the house once the storm hits. These West Texas storms can be violent." He left at a run, and Theodore began her own preparations. She brought in the wash from the line, secured the shutters on the windows, brought in firewood in case the outdoor woodpile got soaked. She filled every container she could find with water. She checked on the chickens, making sure their coop was secure. The sky grew darker, an eerie greenish cast coloring the light. The wind picked up, first in gusts, then in a steady howl. Theodore was securing the last shutter when she saw Isaac riding hard toward the barn, driving a group of cattle before him. Even from a distance, she could see the strain on his face. The first drops of rain fell, large and heavy, raising puffs of dust where they struck the dry ground. Within seconds, it was a downpour, sheets of water driven nearly horizontal by the wind. Theodore ran for the house, soaked before she reached the porch. Inside, she toweled off and changed into dry clothes, then went to the window to watch. Lightning cracked overhead, so close the thunder was simultaneous, shaking the house. The rain pounded on the roof like drumbeats, water running in rivers past the windows. Where was Isaac? He should have made it to the house by now. Theodore paced, anxiety mounting. What if he was hurt? What if his horse had thrown him? What if he was lying somewhere injured while the storm raged? An hour passed. 2. The storm showed no signs of abating. Theodore lit lamps against the unnatural darkness, tried to distract herself with mending, failed utterly. She kept returning to the window, searching the rain-lashed landscape for any sign of him. When the door finally burst open, Theodore spun around with a cry of relief. Isaac stood dripping in the doorway, drenched to the skin, his hat gone, his hair plastered to his head. He looked exhausted. "Are you all right?" Theodore rushed to him. "You are soaked through, you will catch your death." "Had to make sure the cattle were secure," Isaac said, his teeth chattering slightly. "Lost my hat somewhere. Horse spooked at the lightning and nearly threw me." Theodore was already moving, grabbing towels, stirring up the fire in the stove. "Get out of those wet clothes, I will make hot coffee." Isaac disappeared into his room and emerged a few minutes later in dry clothes, his hair toweled but still damp. Theodore handed him a cup of coffee, their fingers brushing. He wrapped his hands around the cup gratefully. "I was worried," Theodore said quietly. Isaac looked at her over the rim of the cup. "I am sorry, I did not mean to frighten you. The storm is so violent, I thought something had happened to you. I am fine. Just wet and tired." The storm raged on through the afternoon and into the evening. Theodore made dinner while Isaac dozed in the rocking chair, exhaustion finally claiming him. She woke him gently when the food was ready, and they ate together listening to the rain drum on the roof. "I have never seen a storm like this," Theodore said. "They do not happen often, but when they do, they are fierce." Isaac looked toward the window. I just hope the creek does not flood. If it does, it could wash out the bridge and we will be cut off from town for weeks. After dinner, Isaac checked outside one more time, then came back looking grim. Water is rising fast. We will have to wait and see what morning brings. They sat together in the main room, the lamps casting warm light against the darkness outside. The storm had settled into a steady, heavy rain, less violent but no less concerning. "Tell me something," Isaac said suddenly. "Something about yourself that I do not know." Theodore considered. "I can play the piano, or I could years ago. There was an old piano at the orphanage and one of the matrons taught me." "I did not know that. There is not much call for piano playing on a ranch." Isaac smiled slightly. "True enough, but I would like to hear you play someday if the opportunity ever arises." "What about you?" Theodore asked. "Tell me something I do not know." Isaac was quiet for a moment. "I am glad you are here," he said finally, his voice low. "These past weeks, having you here, it has made this place feel like home again, like it did when my mother was alive. I did not realize how lonely I was until the loneliness was gone." Theodore's heart beat faster. "I am glad I am here too. I did not realize how much I needed a place to belong until I found one." Isaac looked at her, really looked at her, and Theodore saw everything she had been hoping to see in his eyes. Warmth, affection, and yes, attraction. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it again, shaking his head slightly. "What?" Theodore asked softly. "I should not," Isaac said. "Should not what?" He stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back. "Theodore, when I brought you here, I promised you would be safe, that I would respect your position and your privacy. I gave my word. You have kept that promise. But I am having difficulty continuing to keep it." The admission seemed torn from him. "You must know how I feel. I try to hide it, but I am not sure I am succeeding." Theodore stood as well, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he must hear it. "How do you feel?" Isaac turned to face her fully. "Like I am standing at the edge of a cliff, and one more step will send me over. Like I think about you every moment I am away from the house. Like I rush through my work so I can come home sooner, just to see your face and hear your voice." He dragged a hand through his hair. "This is not what I intended. You are here to work, to have a safe place. I am not supposed to develop feelings for you." "What if I developed feelings too?" Theodore asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Isaac froze. "What?" "What if I find myself listening for your horse at the end of the day? What if I make extra effort with dinner just because I want to see you smile when you taste it? What if I think about you constantly and wonder if you might possibly think about me too?" "Theodore," Isaac said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying that I have fallen in love with you," Theodore said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. "I did not mean to. I tried not to, but I did anyway." Isaac crossed the room in 3 long strides. He stopped just in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, could see the rapid pulse at his throat. "I have loved you since you gave me $8 based on nothing but faith," he said. "I have loved you since I watched you kneel in my mother's garden and promise to make it thrive. I have loved you since I came home that first day to a house that felt alive again." He lifted his hand, then hesitated. "May I touch you?" "Yes," Theodore breathed. His hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. "I love you, Theodore Walsh. I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I am certain of this as I have never been certain of anything." "I am certain too," Theodore said. Isaac smiled, that transformative smile that made her heart skip. "Then may I kiss you?" Instead of answering, Theodore rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was sweet and gentle, a question and an answer all at once. Isaac's arms came around her, pulling her close but not too close, still careful, still respectful even in this moment of intimacy. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. Theodore laughed, the sound joyous. "That is very sudden. I know. But why wait when I know what I want? When I know that I want to spend every day for the rest of my life with you? Marry me, Theodore. Be my wife, my partner. Help me build this ranch into something great." "Yes," Theodore said, certain and sure. "Yes, I will marry you." Isaac kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands in her hair. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, in the small ranch house in the middle of West Texas, two people who had been alone had found each other, and the world was bright with possibility. They were married 3 weeks later at the small church in Fort Stockton. Reverend Thompson performed the ceremony, beaming as if he had arranged the match himself. Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house attended, along with a handful of townspeople who knew Isaac. It was simple and brief, but when Isaac slipped a thin gold band onto Theodore's finger and kissed her as his wife, it felt like the most momentous occasion in the world. They held a small celebration at the ranch, Reverend Thompson and a few of Isaac's rancher friends joining them for a meal Theodore had spent days preparing. As the sun set and the guests departed, Isaac and Theodore stood together on the porch, watching the sky blaze with color. "Mrs. Yates," Isaac said, testing the name. "My wife." "Mr. Yates," Theodore replied, smiling. "My husband." That night, in the larger bedroom that had been Isaac's, they consummated their marriage with tenderness and care. Isaac was gentle, patient, guiding Theodore through her nervousness to pleasure. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, talking softly about their plans and dreams. "I want children," Theodore said. "A house full of them. I want to give them the childhood I never had, full of love and security." "Then we will have them," Isaac promised, his hand splayed across her stomach. "As many as you want. And I want to expand the garden, maybe start selling vegetables in town. We could build up a second income stream." Isaac kissed her temple. "Good idea, you have a head for business. We could buy more land, increase the herd. In a few years, the Y-Bar could be the biggest ranch in the county." "We will build it together," Isaac said. "Everything together." The months that followed were filled with hard work and deep contentment. Theodore threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm, not just managing the household but contributing ideas and labor to the ranching operation itself. She learned to ride well again, sometimes accompanying Isaac when he worked the herd. She expanded the garden significantly, and by late summer, they were selling vegetables to the general store in town, bringing in extra income. Isaac was a considerate and loving husband. He consulted Theodore on all major decisions, treating her as a true partner rather than simply a wife. When he made a good profit on a cattle sale, he brought her gifts: books for the small library they were building, fabric for new dresses, a set of good cooking pots to replace the battered ones. Winter came, and with it, a new development. Theodore began to feel ill in the mornings, a queasy, unsettled feeling that took her a while to recognize. When she missed her monthly courses for the second time, she knew. She told Isaac one evening after dinner, unable to contain her joy any longer. "I am going to have a baby." Isaac's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, then pure, unrestrained joy. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing like she had never heard him laugh before. "A baby," he said, setting her down carefully as if she might break. "We are going to have a baby. In early summer, I think." Isaac knelt and pressed a kiss to her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one. I am your father, and I already love you more than I knew was possible." Theodore ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full she thought it might burst. We are going to be a family. We already are a family, Isaac said, standing and pulling her into his arms. But we are going to be a bigger one. He became even more solicitous as the pregnancy progressed. He insisted she not lift anything heavy, not work too hard, rest whenever she felt tired. Theodore protested that she was pregnant, not ill, but secretly she loved his attentiveness. "I cannot lose you," Isaac said one night when she complained about his hovering. "You and this baby, you are my entire world. Let me take care of you." "I am not going anywhere," Theodore promised. "I am strong. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. Not my woman, not my baby." Theodore's labor began on a warm June morning. The pain started slowly, building gradually through the day. Isaac wanted to ride for the doctor immediately, but Theodore convinced him to wait, that it would be hours yet by evening. The pains were intense and close together. Isaac finally rode hard for town, returning with Dr. Mitchell, an older man with gentle hands and a calm demeanor. He examined Theodore and declared everything progressing normally. "First babies take their time," he told Isaac, who was pacing like a caged animal. "Why do not you boil some water, get some clean linens ready, make yourself useful?" The labor was long and difficult. Theodore had never experienced such pain, such exhaustion. But Isaac stayed with her throughout, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement. When she was certain she could not go on, he reminded her that she was the strongest person he knew, that she could do this. Finally, as dawn broke over the Texas hills, Theodore gave one final push, and the room filled with the sound of a baby crying. Dr. Mitchell held up a small, squirming infant, red-faced and furious at being thrust into the world. "It is a boy," the doctor announced. Theodore fell back against the pillows, tears streaming down her face. A boy. A son. Isaac cut the cord with shaking hands, then Dr. Mitchell cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket. He placed the infant in Theodore's arms, and she looked down at the tiny face, overcome with instant, fierce love. "Hello, my son," she whispered. Isaac sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around Theodore, his other hand gently touching the baby's soft hair. "He is perfect." "What should we name him?" Theodore asked. They had discussed names for months but had never quite decided. Now, looking at their son, Isaac said, "What about James? It was my father's name." "James Yates," Theodore said, testing it. "It is perfect, doctor." Mitchell stayed another hour to make sure both mother and baby were doing well, then took his payment and left with instructions for care. Isaac saw him out, then returned to the bedroom to find Theodore nursing the baby, little James latched on and feeding hungrily. "Are you all right?" Isaac asked, sitting beside her again. "Tired, sore, happier than I have ever been in my entire life." Isaac kissed her forehead. "You were amazing, so strong, so brave." "I had help," she smiled at him. "You stayed with me the whole time." "I know that is not proper, that men usually wait elsewhere, but I needed you. There is nowhere else I would have been." They sat together in the early morning light, their son between them, and Theodore marveled at how far she had come. A year ago, she had been alone and desperate, the last woman left at the orphanage with no prospects and no hope. Now she was a wife, a mother, a partner in a thriving ranch. She had love, security, purpose. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked. "That I was the luckiest woman alive the day you said come home with me." Isaac smiled, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I was the lucky one. You saved me, Theodore. I was just existing before you came. You taught me how to live again." Little James made a small sound, his tiny fist waving in the air. Theodore caught it gently, marveling at the perfect tiny fingers. "He is going to have a good life," she said. "Full of love and family, everything I never had." "Everything we will build together," Isaac agreed. As James grew, The ranch prospered. Isaac and Theodore worked side by side, building the Y Bar into one of the most successful operations in the county. They added more land, increased the herd, built a larger house to accommodate their growing family. 2 years after James was born, Theodore gave birth to a daughter, Sarah, with her father's gray-blue eyes and her mother's determination. 18 months later, another son, Michael, joined the family. The house rang with laughter and the sound of children playing. Theodore started a school for the ranch children in the area, teaching reading and writing and arithmetic in the front room of their house. Isaac built on an addition specifically for this purpose, and soon a dozen children were attending regularly, their parents grateful for the education. The vegetable garden had expanded into a full market garden, with Theodore employing 2 local women to help with the planting and harvesting. They supplied vegetables to 3 towns now, and the income was substantial. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Theodore with a piano, shipped all the way from San Antonio. It took 6 men to move it into the house, and when Theodore sat down to play, her fingers stumbling over the keys after so many years, her children gathered around to listen in wonder. "You remembered," she said to Isaac, tears in her eyes. "I remember everything you have ever told me," he replied. Life was not without challenges. There were drought years when water was scarce and the cattle suffered. There were hard winters when they lost stock to cold and disease. There were illnesses that frightened them, injuries that required trips to the doctor in town. But through it all, they faced everything together. On hard days, they supported each other. On good days, they celebrated together. They built a life of love and partnership, of shared dreams and mutual respect. 10 years after their marriage, Theodore stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar shades of amber and rose. Isaac came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. How much has changed. How far we have come." In the yard, James was teaching Sarah to rope fence posts while Michael played with the ranch dogs. The sound of their laughter drifted on the evening breeze. The garden was lush and green, the fields dotted with cattle, the barn and outbuildings well maintained and prosperous. "You ever regret it?" Isaac asked. "Taking a chance on a stranger coming to this isolated place?" Theodore turned in his arms to face him. "Not for a single moment. You gave me everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know to dream of. A home, a family, love, purpose. You gave me a life." "You gave me the same," Isaac said, cupping her face in his work-roughened hands. "I was half alive before you came. You brought light and warmth and meaning to everything." He kissed her, sweet and familiar, the kiss of a husband who loved his wife deeply after 10 years of marriage. When they pulled apart, Theodore rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Isaac Yates. I love you, Theodore Yates." As the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to emerge in the vast Texas sky, they stood together on the porch of the home they had built, surrounded by the life they had created. The orphan who had been the last woman left, unwanted and alone, had found her place in the world. The lonely cowboy who had been merely surviving had learned to truly live. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting. A ranch, yes, but more than that. A family, a legacy, a love that would endure for all their days and beyond, in the children they raised and the grandchildren yet to come. The wind whispered through the sage, carrying the scent of rain and promise. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and cattle lowed in the fields. The windmill creaked its familiar rhythm, and from inside the house came the sound of the piano as James practiced the lesson his mother had taught him that afternoon. It was the sound of home, of happiness, of a life well lived and deeply cherished, and it was only the beginning. Years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and growth. The Y-Bar Ranch became known throughout West Texas, not just for its quality cattle, but for the family that ran it with integrity and care. Isaac and Theodore's reputation for fairness in business and generosity to neighbors in need spread far beyond Fort Stockton. James grew into a strong young man with his father's quiet determination and his mother's compassionate heart. At 18, he was already managing a significant portion of the ranch operations, showing a natural talent for working with both animals and people. Sarah, at 16, had her mother's head for business and her father's steady nerve. She kept the ranch books with precision and had started a small side business breeding and training horses. Michael, at 14, was the family's scholar, equally comfortable working cattle or buried in the books his mother ordered from back east. Theodore's school had grown as well. The addition Isaac had built now educated 20 children, and Theodore had hired another teacher to help manage the students. She took particular joy in working with children from difficult circumstances, remembering her own orphaned past. One spring morning, a wagon pulled up to the ranch carrying a woman Theodore had not seen in more than a decade. Mrs. Hadley stepped down, older and grayer but still recognizable. Theodore ran from the house, joy and surprise flooding through her. "Mrs. Hadley, I cannot believe it is you." The older woman embraced her tightly. "Let me look at you. My goodness, Theodore, you are radiant. Motherhood and marriage clearly agree with you. What are you doing here? How did you find me?" "I have been in Dallas these past years, working with another orphanage. But I am retiring now, and I wanted to see you before I return east to live with my sister. I heard through acquaintances about your school, about your family. I had to see for myself that you had found happiness." Theodore linked her arm through Mrs. Hadley's. "Come inside. I want you to meet everyone." Over tea and fresh baked bread, Theodore introduced Mrs. Hadley to her children and Isaac. The older woman's eyes filled with tears as she listened to the story of how Theodore and Isaac had met, how their love had grown, how they had built this life together. "I worried about you so much after you left with Mr. Yates," Mrs. Hadley confessed. "I prayed every night that I had not sent you into danger." "You sent me to my destiny," Theodore said warmly. "The best thing that ever happened to me was being the last woman left at that orphanage. It led me here to this life, to this family." Mrs. Hadley stayed for 3 days, and during that time, Theodore showed her everything: the ranch, the school, the garden, the life she had built. On the evening before Mrs. Hadley was to leave, the two women sat on the porch watching the sunset, just as Theodore and Isaac so often did. "You have done more than survive," Mrs. Hadley said quietly. "You have thrived. You have built something beautiful from nothing. Your parents would be so proud." "I hope so," Theodore said. "I try to honor their memory by living fully, by loving completely." "You are doing exactly that." Mrs. Hadley squeezed her hand. "I came here partly to apologize for sending you away with so little, for not being able to do more for you." "There is nothing to apologize for," Theodore said firmly. "You did the best you could with the resources you had. You taught me to read, to think, to value education and hard work. Those lessons served me well. You gave me what I needed to succeed." The next morning, as Mrs. Hadley's wagon pulled away, Theodore waved until it disappeared from sight. Isaac came to stand beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "Are you sad?" he asked. "A little, but mostly grateful. She was a link to my past, and seeing her helped me realize how far I have come, how much I have to be thankful for." That summer brought a drought, one of the worst the region had seen in years. The creek that ran through the property slowed to a trickle, then dried up completely. The grass turned brown and brittle. Isaac and the children worked long hours hauling water from the deep well to keep the cattle alive. It was a test of everything they had built. Theodore rationed the garden water, prioritizing the vegetables that would feed the family through the winter. She and Sarah preserved every bit of food they could, preparing for the possibility that the drought might continue into the next year. Other ranchers in the area suffered as well. Some, less prepared or less experienced, faced the possibility of losing everything. Isaac and Theodore made the decision to help where they could, sharing water from their deep well, offering advice on water conservation, buying cattle from desperate neighbors at fair prices to keep the families afloat. "We can afford it," Theodore said when Isaac worried they were extending themselves too far. "And more importantly, it is the right thing to do. We have been blessed. We can share those blessings." The drought finally broke in late September with a series of storms that filled the creek and turned the brown landscape green again. The ranchers they had helped did not forget. When Isaac needed extra hands for a major roundup, men showed up volunteering their time. When Theodore's school needed repairs, neighbors arrived with tools and materials. "This is what community means," Isaac told his children as they watched their neighbors work. "You help when you can, and when you need help, it is there. Remember this." The children did remember. James, Sarah, and Michael grew up understanding that their family's success came with responsibility, that those who had much were obligated to share with those who had less. When James was 22, he married a young woman named Catherine from a neighboring ranch. The wedding was held at the Y Bar, with half the county in attendance. Theodore stood beside her son, watching him pledge his life to the woman he loved, and felt the circle of life continuing. "I remember our wedding," Isaac whispered to her during the ceremony. "Simple and perfect." "All weddings are perfect when two people truly love each other," Theodore replied. James and Catherine built a house on the far side of the Y Bar property, and James took over more of the daily ranch operations, allowing Isaac to slow down slightly. Isaac was in his early 50s now, still strong but feeling the wear of decades of hard physical labor. "I do not mind getting older," he told Theodore one evening. "Every gray hair, every ache and pain, it all represents a life well lived. I would not trade a single moment." "Not even the hard times," Theodore teased, "especially not the hard times. They taught us what we were made of, tested us, and we came through stronger." Sarah married at 20, a young lawyer from Fort Stockton who had been courting her for 2 years. She and her husband moved to town, where Sarah opened a general store while her husband practiced law. She remained involved in the ranch's business end, visiting weekly to go over the books and plan strategy with her parents and brother. Michael attended college in San Antonio, studying agriculture and modern ranching techniques. He returned to the Y Bar with ideas for improving their operation, and Isaac listened carefully, implementing many of his son's suggestions. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. On Theodore and Isaac's 20th wedding anniversary, their children organized a celebration that brought together family, friends, and half the county. As Theodore looked around at the crowd of people, at the home they had filled with love, at the children and now grandchildren running around the yard, she marveled at the abundance of it all. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked, coming to stand beside her. "That I am the richest woman in the world," Theodore said. "Not in money, though we are comfortable, rich in love, in family, in community, rich in all the things that truly matter." Isaac raised his glass. "To 20 years, to the woman who saved my life by agreeing to come home with me." To the future we built together and the future still ahead of us." They toasted, and Theodore looked at her husband, the man who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself, who had offered her a home and then offered her his heart. The years had added lines to his face and gray to his hair, but he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen, still the love of her life. "To 20 more years," she said, "and 20 beyond that." "To forever," Isaac agreed. They got their 20 more years and beyond. Theodore and Isaac grew old together, watching their children raise children of their own on the land they had built. The Y-Bar Ranch passed to James, who ran it with the same integrity his parents had shown, while Sarah and Michael maintained their own successful ventures while staying connected to the family enterprise. Theodore continued teaching almost until the end, finding joy in shaping young minds. Isaac worked the ranch as long as his body allowed, finally handing over full control to James in his 70s, but still offering advice and wisdom. One warm spring evening, when Theodore was 70 and Isaac was 74, they sat on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and beautiful, a testament to their life's work. The sound of grandchildren playing drifted from the yard, and the scent of Theodore's roses perfumed the air. "You remember the day we met?" Isaac asked, his hand finding hers as naturally as breathing. "Every detail," Theodore said. "You were being bullied by Mr. Jennings, and I could not stand by and watch injustice. You gave me $8, 2/3 of everything you had in the world. Best investment I ever made." Isaac laughed, the sound still warm and rich. "I could not believe it. This beautiful, brave woman defending me, lending me money, believing I was honest just because she decided I was. I was right, was I not?" "You were right." Isaac squeezed her hand. "About everything. About me, about us, about what we could build together." Theodore leaned her head on his shoulder, comfortable and content. "I love you, Isaac Yates, today and every day for the rest of my life. I love you, Theodore Yates. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They sat in peaceful silence as the sun set in its familiar glory, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose and purple. Somewhere in the distance, cattle called to each other. The windmill creaked its eternal rhythm. The roses released their sweet scent on the evening breeze. It was the sound and smell of home, of a life built on love and trust and hard work. Of two people who had started with nothing but faith in each other and built an empire not of wealth but of family, community, and enduring love. The orphan girl who had been the last woman left, unwanted and forgotten, had become the heart of a thriving family and community. The lonely cowboy who had been merely surviving had found his reason to truly live. And their love story, which had begun with 4 simple words, "Come home with me," had become a legacy that would endure for generations. A testament to the power of taking a chance, of believing in goodness, of choosing love even when fear counsels caution. As the stars began to emerge in the vast Texas sky, Theodore and Isaac sat hand in hand on the porch of the home they had built together, surrounded by the evidence of a life beautifully lived. They had faced hardship and triumph, drought and plenty, sorrow and joy. Through it all, they had faced it together, their love the foundation on which everything else was built. It was a good life, a full life, a life rich in all the ways that mattered. And it was theirs, built from nothing but hope, faith, and the courage to say yes when a stranger offered a desperate woman a chance at a new beginning. "Come home with me," he had said, and she had. And in doing so, they had both found their way home at last.